This lovely story is sponsored by the Moomoo investing app, giving Americans unfettered access to East Asian stock markets. Sign up with my link in the description to get your free shares worth up to $10,000. In the year 1275, Song dynasty warrior Zhuo Li fought valiantly against the Mongol invaders at the city of Changsha, Hunan province. According to family legend, Li led a cavalry attack to destroy a Mongol gunpowder battery, before himself being immolated in the resulting fire. This suicidal attack bought valuable time to the city of Changsha, so the residents could escape, and his sacrifice was not forgotten. Although Changsha was conquered by the Mongols in the following months, Zhuo Li's family had escaped with the other residents, and they were honored by the dynasty's nobles into perpetuity. In the centuries that followed, Li's descendants achieved great acclaim as political officials in the Great Qing dynasty under Emperor Qinglong, who conquered several Central Asian kingdoms by the mid-18th century. Then, the dominoes started falling, and thus began a 400-year downward spiral until we wound up with Nep, a 19-year-old Chinese girl living in Canada who corrupted her father into blowing over $400,000. Although we already know how this story ends, how did we go from Zhuo Li, hero of Changsha, to Zhuo Nep, gambling addict and dominatrix cosplayer? I invite you to witness how Nep got her phone taken away after she and her father traded like shit, hand in hand. Papa Zhuo was a peasant class accountant in China in the early 1990s. In those days, the only way to get a decent house was to work for state-run businesses overseen by the Communist Party. Papa Zhuo, being an undercover capitalist, was out of luck. But 1998 brought about reform policies that commercialized real estate. The visionary accountant knew what this meant. So Big Papa Zhuo began investing in Beijing real estate in the early 2000s. Although the industry was slow to pick up after the 1998 reform, Chinese real estate entered bubble mode by late 2002. Everything south of the Great Wall was shooting up in price, and Papa Zhuo had his first taste of thick cheddar. But as the renminbi flowed like green tea, the big man faced many challenges. The rising big shot knew that an overextended portfolio could get massacred worse than his old ancestors in the Song dynasty. Protecting himself required extensive hours spent making sure he stayed on the right side of the central party, and lip service to the government was a regular requirement. It was around this time that Papa Zhuo's pullout game failed him, and 9 months later, Nep was born. The next 15 years after 2002 were fruitful for Papa Zhuo, and the Chinese real estate market served him well. But by this time, Papa's wife was getting up there in years, and if they were going to have another baby, they needed to take the gloves off. And at this time, China's one-child policy put the communist government right up in the bedroom. Papa Zhuo and his wife were highly motivated to spawn once again, so our man plopped his family on a ship to Canada and set sail with then 15-year-old Nep in tow. As he would soon find out, his daughter's passive Chinese temperament would not last in the new world, and Nep devolved into Luo Qiaobao. As Nep gets off the boat, let's take a moment to recognize the best way to get access to the Chinese, Hong Kong, and Singapore stock markets in addition to the US stock market. Using the Moomoo investing app, Americans get open season on companies that we normally wouldn't be able to tap from the US exchanges, whether you want to go long or short the CCP. A feature of theirs that I really love is this inflow-outflow tracker segregated by trade size. So not only do you get to see are there more people getting in than getting out, but you also get to see who they are, whether they're the big corporate investors or the little guys. Let's use this tool to look at the longest running meme stock, that's GameStop. You've got small investors looking like they're slightly more willing to get out than they are to get in, but medium and large investors are buying more than they're selling. But look at those big extra large orders. 10 times more inflow than outflow. So those big money traders, the hedge funds, the corporate funds, they are doing a lot more buying than they are selling. So they're either covering their shorts or they're loading the boat for a big run up. Having information like this gives you that edge, so you can follow the smart money and jump in before the trend really takes off. Get your account open now with my referral, and Moomoo will double the number of free shares you typically get. You'll get up to 15 free shares worth up to $2,000 each. This is where I'm parking some freeloader challenge money while I await that 60-day vesting period. I got 8 free shares for my deposit, but you use my promotion and you'll get 15 free shares. This is all free money, do not leave it on the table. And now, let's get back to story time. In the new world, Nep and the rest of Papa Zhuo's family adapted well enough, and shortly before his daughter turned 18, he awarded her with a small sum of $80,000 so that she may begin her boomer dividend ETF investments. He reasoned that real estate was time-intensive, and passive index funds would yield better results with much less work. He wanted his daughter's life to be easier than his, so he was happy to award her with the sum of cash. In short order, Nep started scouting diversified mutual funds. And then Kung Flu bulldozed through like Kublai Khan on Charlie. All bets were off. During her Canadian lockdown, Nep turned her sights to Momo stocks instead, a piss-poor decision. Not only did Nep disregard ETFs in favor of stonks, but she did her DD on the worst website possible, Reddit's WallStreetBets cesspool of degenerates. To Nep's credit, she did tiptoe in with daddy's money, but by mid-year, it became apparent that handing a teenager 80 G's to go trade stocks with was not what Sun Tzu would have advised. Nep's adventure into WallStreetBets revealed a secret money cheat code that could turn water into wine. Short-term, as in 0 day to expiration, call options. But the summer of 2020 was coincidentally a great time to trade like shit and still make money. Toronto shuts down all businesses, call options. US-Canada border closed, call options. Just buy calls and you'll print that Canadian monopoly money. By early 2021, our young Mulan had almost doubled Papa's cash pile into over 120,000. Impressed by his daughter's successful transition into this new world culture, Papa Joe took a page out of Nep's playbook and threw 60 grand into out-of-the-money Apple calls expiring 5 days later. By day 4, the position was down to 13 grand. Nep pleaded with her father to sell, but he refused. In a stroke of luck that would give Kai Shen a run for his money, the gods smiled upon Papa Joe and Tim Cook. Apple shot back up on day 5, carrying that 16,000 of detritus into an absurd 360K. From that moment on, Papa and Nep were in this together, degenerate daughter and corrupted father. Their portfolios swung wildly, with Nep having more success initially than Papa Joe. But as the market flattened out into the autumn of 2020, losses on out-of-the-money calls started to pile up. Nep needed a new approach. Luckily, WallStreetBets delivered. In the aftermath of the GameStop pump, a new trend emerged. Nep and other gamblers disguised as traders discovered SPACs, essentially shell companies that use investors' money to buy a profitable business and take over operations. What better way to make money than to invest in a company that just got bought out and their board members fired? Nep's first attack was an ambush on ATER, a recently merged de-SPAC that makes kitchen appliances. ATER had recently crashed from 50 down to 5, so the chart was looking really bullish. Wu Zhechan dumped 80 bands into ATER shares and watched her position rise to 180,000 within days. But was that enough to cash out? No. Nep set a stop loss, which immediately triggered a sell-off right down to her stop price, which is exactly what happens every time someone sets a stop. But ATER bounced right off of her stop and began to rise again. Nep was mad as hell and FOMO'd back in, only for ATER to reverse back down immediately. In this business, we call this strategy trading like shit. Furious, Nep put her ATER aside and observed SPY. The ETF had been falling all day, so our girl threw 70,000 down on 1 day to expiration puts. Less than 10 minutes later, SPY began a massive rally. Like I said, TLS to the extreme. By the time she closed out, Nep was back down to $105,000, a $75,000 loss in a single day, which honestly, given how bad she was trading, is really not that bad of a loss when you think about it. And then went right back to the casino. Nep traded a series of low-float SPACs, up and down 6 figures a month in total numbness. Complete disconnect from her money. Papa Joe was right there with her. It wasn't until Nep discovered convincing DD on WallStreetBets that she fully committed to a play once again. An old friend of ours named user Holicisms argued that the de-SPAC Eaststone, ticker ESSC, was primed for a short squeeze. Although his DD was complete ass, Holicisms is a well-known and respected member of the short squeeze community. This is the man who verifiably made over $7 million on the 2021 AMC squeeze and moved to Japan to pursue a series of short-term relationships with Oriental MILFs, earning him his own Dank Trades video last year. If anyone's DD was to be followed, it was Holicisms. Nep took the DD to heart and took her entire $120,000 portfolio and dumped it into calls at the 10 and 1250 strikes. According to Nep, the target was a 7-figure gain and nothing less. Over the next 2 weeks, ESSC rocketed to $15, a 50% gain on shares and 200% gain on Nep's calls. Just like that, she was at over 380,000. Nep was eager to share the good news. She screenshotted her portfolio and prepared to post on WallStreetBets and Theta Gang's Discord. But she remembered the golden rule. If it's good enough to screenshot, it's good enough to sell. While the average person would treat this screenshot as a sign that it was time to take gains, Nep took this script and flipped it on its head. Instead, she decided that if she did not screenshot, then it was not good enough to sell, and therefore she could reliably hold for more gains. So in a pro-gamer move, She deleted the screenshot of her gains, thus paving the way for a good enough to screenshot situation rising again after the stock rose further. It was a fatal error. ESSC quickly abandoned all its gains and crashed right back down through Nep's strikes. In Nep's own words,
"The dump wasn't something that happened gradually. It was extremely violent and extremely fast. Less than 120 seconds later, it already dumped from 14.5 to 12, triggering a half. Amazing the 120 seconds of panic. It was falling like a fucking knife and falling so fast that my broker couldn't update my portfolio value in time. The fastest dump I have ever seen in my entire life. There were no catalysts, no apparent reason of why the stock dumped and why the market maker didn't hedge. All I know in the 120 seconds is that in the beginning of it, I thought it will surely bounce back like last time. I held when I break 14, then 13, but when it break 12.5 and did not appearing to be bouncing back, reading the 12.5 out of the money call, I knew the setup had changed. 68k were all I had, and I will still have to pay last year's tax."
Nep had lost $300,000 in the blink of an eye. As for Holicisms, meanwhile, it turns out he blew most of his gains on out-of-the-money Tesla and GameStop calls and has less than $1 million now. There are no heroes. Our takeaway is a lesson as old as time. If it's good enough to screenshot, it's good enough to sell. You cannot suppress this fact by resisting the urge to screenshot. You cannot suppress it by deleting a screenshot before you share it. Once you want to screenshot, you already met the trigger. Take your gains. Doing otherwise is like planting a penny heads up and then picking it up yourself in order to get good luck. It's just one of those things that you cannot force. Nep's $380,000 gain would have been enough for a 50% down payment on her dream condo, according to her. $750,000 on a condo sounds pretty insane to me unless it's a freaking penthouse with a live-in butler. But the Canadian real estate market is apparently on some other shit. Instead, Nep still lives at home in Papa Joe's basement, unable to break her insatiable addiction to giving back gains. By her own account, you can't keep your gains if you keep mistaking luck for skill, which is sort of ironic because she still trades zero data expiration options to this day. And where is Papa Joe through this all? Well, he was deeply inspired by his daughter's success on the up days and didn't pay much attention to the down days. After he had his $360,000 gain on Apple in 2020, he never really did put down his phone. He lost all of it, every penny, and then deposited another $100,000 and lost that too. Combined, their losses tap $900,000. If only the Chinese weren't so intent on pushing their luck, maybe Nep could get out of her parents' house. Dear Nep, my Hua Mulan, my Wu Zetian, my Chu Jin, I implore you to take a look at the brand new ticker VOO. Perhaps this one will help you finally build that long-term wealth, inshallah.